GoForThe2.com. This is our Week 8 preview of another matchup in the SEC with huge implications. We already talked about Alabama and Tennessee. We already talked about the Mad Hatter and Johnny Football. We have to talk about the old ball coach and the young upstart, Will Muschamp. It's a 3:30 start. It's on CBS, and this game has huge implications within the SEC. South Carolina is 6-1. Florida, number 2 in the BCS standings at 6-0. And this game is a huge game. You have to check it out if you're an SEC fan or if you just love college football. This is one of the games to watch Saturday afternoon. A quick note about this matchup. Back in 2010, when South Carolina defeated Florida 36-14, it was the first win by South Carolina in the Swamp. They're 1-12 in the previous 13 meetings in Gainesville, and that's a key statistic heading into this matchup. A lot of pressure falling on South Carolina right now. Can they overcome that and pull off the upset? We'll see. We'll give a prediction for this game a little bit later in the week, Thursday morning, so check that out. South Carolina did win 2 years ago, 36-14. They did have Stephen Garcia as their quarterback. This is the first time Connor Shaw's traveling to the Swamp. It's going to be an electric atmosphere, especially with Florida now, and they're high ranking. These fans, these players are going to be up for this ball game, and don't think that Will Muschamp doesn't want to knock off the old ball coach. You have to think again. Emotions and intensity are going to be at an all-time high in this game. Can Connor Shaw contain himself and prove that he can play on back-to-back road games? We know he's a great quarterback. He can run and he can throw, but he had a little problems last week on the road against LSU. South Carolina only rushed for 34 yards last week in Baton Rouge. They're going to need a better effort out of Marcus Lattimore. He had 13 carries last week for 35 yards. He picked up a touchdown, but that was in short yardage. They're going to have to get the ball into Marcus Lattimore's hands via screens or swing passes to spread out the Florida Gator defense and take the pressure off of Connor Shaw. Whether head coach Steve Spurrier and his offensive coordinator can do that is a question mark. They need to take the pressure off of Connor Shaw. They have to get the ball into their playmakers' hands, Ace Sanders, Bruce Ellington, and Lattimore, to take the pressure off the vertical passing game. They cannot be one-dimensional. They cannot afford to get into third and longs. Last week, against LSU, South Carolina was 3 of 13 on third down conversions. They need a better effort out of that. They have to get into short yardage in order to upset the Florida Gators. Both of these teams are carbon copies of each other, both offensively and defensively. When you look at the South Carolina defense, they're 5th in the nation, only surrendering 12.3 points per game. They have Jadeveon Clowney and a great linebacker core, and they showed their experience a couple of weeks ago against Georgia with a very impressive effort. They played very well last week, but wore down late in that matchup against LSU. They surrendered 258 yards rushing to LSU and Spencer Ware. They're going to be facing a Florida Gator offense that is picking up 233 yards rushing per game. That's 14th in the nation. So defensively, if you're a South Carolina Gamecock fan, how does South Carolina shut down the run against Florida? You're going to have to, in my estimation, Lorenzo Ward and Steve Spurrier are going to have to use Jadeveon Clowney, mix him up in different looks, and force Florida's hand, because I think the defensive game approach has to be stuff the run of Mike Gillislee and force the ball into Jeff Driscoll's hands. The carbon copy's got to be what LSU did in the first half of that ball game is what South Carolina has to do in order to pick up the victory on the road. Whether they can do that or not is a key question mark. I think it's going to be a great game. When you look at this matchup, last week, though, South Carolina took the lead in halftime, but then sort of faltered in the second half. Steve Spurrier actually got out-coached by Les Miles in the second half of that ball game. And if there's one thing that we've learned about Florida, they've made halftime adjustments in the Tennessee and Texas A&M game and LSU game. Florida trailed at the half. It was Will Muschamp's ability to make adjustments and the players to buy in and implement that is why Florida is 6-0. So, Steve Spurrier needs a great game plan, and he needs to make adjustments as the game progresses. Can he do that is a key question mark. He's a very great head coach. He's one of the best in the game, and if there's anybody that knows this swamp, it's Steve Spurrier. So expect him to come in ready, guns a-blazing, and he'll have his South Carolina Gamecocks ready for this matchup. If there is pressure, I think it falls more on South Carolina right now due to the fact of it's back-to-back road games for the Gamecocks. They are coming in off a 23-21 loss to LSU, and to get back into the national title hunt and to get back into the SEC race, so to speak, they're going to need to upset the Gators. So that's a lot of pressure. Florida at home, South Carolina on the road. So more pressure, in my estimation, on South Carolina. Let's talk about Jeff Driscoll and the Florida Gator offense. They're performing very well. They're coming off a 31-17 victory on the road against Vanderbilt, an impressive victory against a very gutty Vanderbilt Commodore team. But how does the pressure affect this young team now, where they just got the number 2 ranking in the BCS? They're sitting at number 2 in the BCS standings. They're a very young team. How does Florida playing at home play with that type of pressure, knowing that all eyes are on them? Jeff Driscoll, he had a pretty good game last week in terms of he only threw for 77 yards, but he burned the Commodores with his feet. Now he's at home, and he's going to have to make some plays in order to get the Gators to 7-0. Can he do that at home? He didn't do it really against LSU. They relied on that heavy offensive line. They ran 25 straight times against LSU and wore down the LSU Tiger defense. Can Jeff Driscoll make some throws? He showed some inexperience against LSU. He turned the ball over inside the 10. He needs ball security heading into this ball game. I think the offensive philosophy for Will Muschamp: rely on Mike Gillislee in the offensive line. See if you can get some yards early. You're at home. You use the heavy offensive line to see if you can wear down South Carolina. South Carolina gave up 258 yards in that contest to LSU. I would think that, use ball control early. See if you could pick up some yardage and see if you can move the chains, and then work Jeff Driscoll off of play action. Whether Florida can do that or not is going to be a key question mark as well. Defensively for the Gators, they're only giving up 12.3 points per game as well. And they shut down some high-powered offenses when you look at it. They contained Tyler Bray. They held him to only 20 points. They held Johnny Football and Texas A&M to only 17 points. Those are very good efforts, especially on the road. So they shut down Zach Mettenberger and LSU's offense. They made them one-dimensional 2 weeks ago. They're going to have to do the same against Connor Shaw and Marcus Lattimore. Whether they can do that, they do have some concerns defensively. When you look at their secondary, and Elam, he has been burned a couple of times over the last couple of weeks. He got burned a couple of weeks ago by Odell Beckham Jr. If it wasn't for him knocking the ball away, that contest might have had a different outcome. And then he was burned last week on the road against Vanderbilt. So can Ace Sanders and can Bruce Ellington get behind Elam in that secondary? They're great in run support, not so great in pass coverage. So I think that that's a key factor heading in defensively for Will Muschamp. It's going to be a great game. It's evenly matched teams, both offensively and defensively. Steve Spurrier needs no encouragement going back to the swamp. If you don't think he wants to rub it in the Gators' face, think again. Will Muschamp, he's got a chip on his shoulder as well. You can see that. He thinks he's a good head coach. Now he's got to prove it. You got to stay with us at GoForTheChew.com. We'll have our prediction for this game Thursday morning.